Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third panel of the day, which is all about redefining multi-skilling to meet the challenges whilst benefiting employer and employee. Now, the idea of multi-skilling has numerous benefits, including streamlining processes, refocusing training budgets, and equipping employees with the right skills and knowledge to carry out different tasks. The downside, however, is that employees often feel overworked. Now, we also know that staff have had to multi-skill to meet the demands and pressures during the pandemic. But what was the impact to morale? How do public sector leaders maintain the momentum that we saw during the pandemic? And does multi-skilling benefit public sector in the long run, or is it really a short-term solution? Finally, how can multi-skilling be rebranded so that both employer and employee see those benefits? Well, it's a lot to discuss, and thankfully we have a fantastic panel lined up for you, and they are James Biddlestone, who is the Head of People and Transformation at Mansfield District Council. James, hopefully, fingers crossed, technology willing, will be joining us very shortly. But James's key skills are leading and transforming services, partnership and collaborative working, delivering complex work programs, and all to achieve successful outcomes. We do have with us Professor Dr. Kate Reynolds, who's the Assistant Director for Lifelong Learning and Employability, and she's based at Birmingham City Council. Now, Kate's portfolio includes the Career Service, Youth Employment Initiative, Birmingham Youth Service, community libraries, and the Library of Birmingham, and also Birmingham Adult Education. We also have Dr. Aisling Diamond, who's the Deputy Medical Director, Education and Workforce at Southern Health and Social Care Trust. Dr. Diamond is a consultant in emergency medicine. She's very experienced and has developed an outreach service to manage intoxicated patients rather than using the default position of send to ED. And last but not least, we have Anna Mims, who's MBE, Head of Employment Skills and Adult Education for Derby City Council. Now, Anna helps organisations improve their relationships between finance and operations, and she was also appointed an MBE for Services to Social Enterprise and Community in 2013. So a fabulous panel lined up, ready to go. Welcome to you all, panel, at the moment. And audience, please do use the Q&A function if you have any questions. As always, we will include them in the discussion today. So let's start with our questions. Kate, if we could start with you, how do you ensure that all communities are included in any growth that we see?
Thank you very much, Samina. It's really lovely to be with everybody this morning. I'm going to come at it, as you would expect, from a Birmingham City Council perspective. The census now shows us that Birmingham is a super diverse city. Our communities, we are a minority majority city. I never like that phrase, but you'll know what I mean by having said that. So I think one of the things we've got to do in Birmingham, we're looking to do, is to get really hyper local. And I think, Samina, your introduction, which talked about the pandemic, taught us all how important place was and local places to people. And I think what we've got to do is match what we know around the opportunities locally to those communities locally, so that actually in one area of Birmingham, we might need to put more work into one particular community in order for them to benefit. But that might be different in another ward and another community across the council. So I think it's mapping those two things together. I think we also have some issues, don't we, in terms of the fragmentation that we see in this sector. We know only this week that Ken Baker and David Blunkett raised the whole issue about T levels and how that actually isn't mapping to BTEC, making it very complicated and I think quite stressful. You talked about the stress, I think, in your introduction of being multi-skilled, the stress that is putting on young people in the system who actually aren't being, in a sense, supported around the notion of transferable skills, which feels like a positive thing. But in a sense, we're badging that as multi-skilling, which feels like more work rather than actually looking at what you're doing and how that can be expanded. So that would be my introduction to that one.
Okay. You certainly raised lots of points there, and I hope we can have a chance, an opportunity as we go through to discuss some of those. But you're talking about hyper specificity, really, then, aren't you? When you talk about tailoring these changes really to the community you're dealing with. I was just wondering about, diverse communities. You spoke about Birmingham being a very diverse community. What sort of mechanisms you would use, because we want to tackle inequality essentially, don't we, as well, and how you would implement that, just whilst we're talking about that specific area.
Okay, so again, I would come back to this notion of being very, very granular with our information and our data. So as well as diversity of our communities and our demographics, we also know they will come with different skill levels. So we need to put both of those pieces of information together and say, actually, in a particular ward, let me call it Yardley for the sake of the fact that I have a Yardley ward, which I don't know very well. So in Yardley, we know that the NHS is going to be recruiting in the next 3 years and needs 300 cleaners, let's say. We look at the demographics in that ward, we find out that we haven't got people to do the skills who could actually then benefit from those opportunities. So we work with our adult education providers, our FE colleges, to start to build up that pipeline so that that community can benefit directly from those employment opportunities that are coming down the pipeline. So it's getting much, much earlier upstream, much further upstream, I think, working with our schools. There's a big push in our schools, as we know, around vocational education. But as somebody did explain to me recently, it is easier to complete a UCAS form, so the form that you need to get to university, than it is to fill out an apprenticeship form. Whilst we have that sort of challenge in the system, it's really difficult for those who want to follow a vocational route to actually get the support that they need and benefit from those opportunities.
Okay, we did actually touch on that on our previous discussion, the
I'm sure you
apprenticeships, yeah, and we did have I think it was Anthony's contact details from the University of Kent, and he's left that, so our audience can get in touch with him if they're concerned about getting onto apprenticeships at all different levels. So hopefully that will help a little bit. Ashley, I wonder if we could come to you now and just ask you about ensuring staff, in particular doctors who've worked a certain way, how you've made them change the way they deliver services, because that's part of the process, isn't it? Bringing people with you.
So first of all, thanks, Samina, and thank you for saying my name properly.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I did check, I promise.
First of all, I've worked in Belfast for 30 years, and we came through a civil war and all of that sort of stuff. So we did work a certain way, and we did have certain types of patients presenting. And what we found that particularly during COVID, we didn't have any choice left. So both was taken from us, and we had to work a different way. And what we found was that a lot of doctors actually they enjoyed the challenge of changing, and they enjoyed the challenge of supporting different services. And so here in Northern Ireland, we broke down all of the silos that would normally exist between services, and allowed, for example, pediatrics to come into the emergency department and support the emergency staff, and the psychiatric doctors to come in and support the emergency staff. And we found that was a real benefit, both in terms of the human aspect, because the pediatric doctors were able to support the emergency doctors, and there was a lot of learning going on between both services. And they started to understand the stresses and the challenges which each of us faced in our own field, and perhaps became a bit less critical as we move forward. So I think one of the things that we started to understand is that we understand the benefit for ourselves personally, but also for the service that we're working in. And once that happened, then there was a lot of a push towards supporting each other and progressing the service. And I suppose that from a different aspect, we also started to understand cost, because doctors don't tend to get involved in cost, but we did. And we started to understand, for example, with the involved technology, how our costs were reduced, and also how our risks were reduced. And once the doctors understood that, there was a lot more buy-in, and a lot of those services then progressed.
So from what you're saying, it sounds like you had to get really bad for it to get better. But equally then, I'm wondering, how did you ensure the longevity of it? How did you keep it going, that change? Because we're not in that same situation now, or certainly the circumstances have changed.
So that's a very good question, and it's very difficult to maintain that force. So what we try to do is to, again, make sure that there are key stakeholders, that there are individuals that the doctors will go to for information or confide in. And if that particular individual or group of individuals have bought into this new way of working, it's almost like a ripple effect. So I just let it grow naturally. I don't try to force anything. And that seems to have been beneficial. It seems to have worked. And we do have a fairly significant proportion of doctors now on side and advocating for a change in the way that we work. In the back of all of this, sorry, it's not in the back, it's actually at the front. The patients prefer the new way of working. I prefer my new way of working because I can talk to people the way I'm talking to you, rather than hopping into my car, driving for miles, trying to find a parking space, and then getting a parking ticket at the end of it all. So the patients prefer it, and so do I. And I guess when there's a win-win, then things progress. But I think one of the obstacles and one of the challenges will be that we also lost an awful lot during the pandemic. So we lost that social interaction. We weren't able to go for a cup of coffee with each other. And so there is a push to try and re-engage with that older way, different way of working from the past.
Yeah, we hear a lot about, don't we, the hybrid way of working now, which is across all industries, I know. Anna, I wonder if we could talk to you now, please, about your particular field and your area of expertise, and how you've optimized a cross-fertilization approach to reduce budget pressures. Now that's
yeah, it's a mouthful, isn't it?
It's a big one as well, isn't it?
It's a big one, and I don't suppose there's anybody on screen or listening to this that isn't in exactly the same situation. And I think nothing I'm going to say, I hope, is sort of groundbreaking particularly. So I don't expect, I think, to do anything other than just sort of point at things that are slightly obvious, actually. But I think there's a tendency, and there certainly has been a tendency over the years for to naturally fall into silos. And I think those silos very often are born of a need to describe organizations in a very specific way. So, it stands to reason that you need an organizational structure, and, they have to be split into sort of recognizable chunks so that you can actually become operationally functional. And there's a tendency when that happens for it almost to define who you're allowed to work with, and how that working, those work streams are going to operate. And there has been a tendency, and I think COVID helped us enormously in this respect, because that tendency to work inside one's own budget, own work streams, and then that peripheral vision of what everybody else has been doing hasn't necessarily helped us work efficiently across different operational strands. I think what we've managed to do in Derby, and it's very, very early days, and it's I don't think there's any sort of particular genius associated with this, but certainly in the adult learning service, we found ourselves a little bit afloat, if you like, and separated from the council in a number of different ways. It was very much a sort of silo, almost like an Almo, but not. And I came in about 3 years ago, and I think one of the things we did very effectively and very fast was to look at where we would add value across every single other department. So, for instance, if we've got sort of health and social care that have got individual struggles, and it's hard to recruit, for instance. I mean, Kate will recognise some of what I'm saying, and so Ashley will as well. It's hard to recruit inside of the health and social care space. So there's huge inefficiencies in terms of agency staff, and that has an impact on core budgets. So what is the most obvious thing to do there is to do exactly what Kate was talking about, is look at your local communities at a granular level and work with community partners and see how can we provide recruitment pipelines directly into jobs. Now, I mean, this has been going on for a long time, but to some extent, the thinking behind doing it internally as part of a financial efficiency that then supported operational practices across different departments and services was quite new thinking. And we were able to actually have quite an impact, and it's ongoing. We haven't solved the problem because, recruiting in health and social care is difficult, and it's going to be ongoing for a long time. But it means that now that conversation is actually quite sophisticated and challenging. And there isn't an expectation for a quick win, but there is an expectation that more internal joined up working practices will come up with efficiency-based solutions where we can all have a better working relationship across the organization as opposed to throughout our silos. And we've sort of looked at that through arts, the community arts, and all the various other different sort of community organizations. And again, leading from what Kate was saying about getting into your communities at granular level, when we're delivering ESOL, English as speakers of other language, when we're dealing with a variety of things, we're working with really interesting community organizations that are then able to deliver some of the services that the council would like to deliver more of as a result of that joined up working. And effectively, that has a positive impact both on our bottom line, because we don't have to manage the entirety of an overhead, but it also increases the amount of income we're going to get through a variety of different funding streams. And we don't buy a new overhead on every new funding stream. So we cross-fertilize the finances on that. There's no reason why every time you get a new funding stream that you need a new overhead. Actually, we can include those in a lot of what we're already doing. And there has been a tendency to over buy on overhead when actually we can incorporate it in some fairly straightforward tweaks with what we've already got. And that's been quite an efficiency and seen us do quite well.
I was just going to say, it sounds very efficient. And I guess, is it a lot, I suppose the question is, why hasn't it already happened, Anna, to a certain degree? Did it need us to go through the pandemic in some respects for it to happen?
There's a little bit of that, perhaps. There's a little bit, and I think it depends. I mean, actually, it's going to have different experiences. It's all going to be different depending on where you are. But I think by having a crisis, sometimes that reduces the. I mean, I'm quite new to the public sector, and I think some outside thinking helps, to be perfectly honest. But I do think that by reducing the need to follow the rules, so we had various different institutional dispensations of various rules to get us through the COVID period. And frankly, we didn't really need them, but they were useful because what they did was enable people not to fall back on the "we're not allowed." And the fear of permissions and all of that stuff, so that we could actually say, we don't need to go through these erroneous processes. It's fine. Nothing terrible is going to happen. We're actually trying new ideas out. The worst thing that's going to happen is not doing that. So that sort of dispensation period where government and local authorities became more able to accept creative solutions was then able to, I think, support those people that were inclined in that way. I mean, some people don't want to, and that's absolutely fine. But those of us that do actually like working like that, and we get better results like that, found that the teams of people were more buoyed up, if you like. Their enthusiasms for change or different ways of doing things, I think, were enhanced by those structural dispensations of regulation that occurred during COVID.
Great. No, I think you're very clear there. I like the way you explained that. I was just wondering, Kate, schools in particular, as both employers and educators, how can they be part of the solutions? And what's your experience around that?
That's really, really helpful. Thank you, Samina. And if I may, by virtue of answering, I want to pick up a point Anna made there. I don't think that actually our careers advice in schools is as creative as it could be. I think we have a great tendency to say to young people, what do you want to be? And they say, I want to be an X, a doctor, a journalist, a this, a that, instead of actually saying, which is what good careers advice would say, what do you want to do? So that might be working with children, and that opens up different opportunities for people. So I think getting much earlier, as I said, in the pipeline would be incredibly helpful, and it picks up what they're doing in health, because actually that's the way the world is now. You need to be able to do lots of things, but if we started by opening that conversation rather than actually by closing it down, I think some of the mental stress that actually young people are suffering at the moment is precisely because they're being told, if you do these particular qualifications, you will end up being an X. Yeah, and that's the way the system is measuring things. Actually, do you know what? Life's a bit wobbly, and we saw that through the pandemic. Stuff happens, and actually our young people are really entitled to be able to have the skills to be resilient and to be able to actually chop and change in their lives, which is where I think adult education, I'm sure in Derby and in Birmingham as well, enables people to have those second and third and sometimes fourth chances, because we don't know what's around the corner. We know we need to reskill our young people in order to have jobs, and particularly green jobs, and there will be a big push on that. But that actually means, as I say, opening people's minds at a much earlier stage, and stop this very narrow view of there's something called academic routes and there's something called vocational routes that actually we need to learn throughout our lives so that we can be multi-skilled. So that's the way I think I would approach it, Samina. But I've really enjoyed Anna's contribution there. It's really helpful.
Yep. No, I think we've
and
enjoyed.
I think it builds on the stuff from Northern Ireland as well, about how you, in a sense, get doctors to think of being more than doctors in some ways.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking as well, as a parent, you've made me check myself as well, because I was thinking I would ask my children, what do you want to do, not what do you want to be? It's quite a pertinent question, isn't it? As you say, opens up so much more.
Can I just say also, leading on with that, Kate, I think we need to reassess the way we view failure.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we have a tendency to go, right, here's the door you go through, and if that door shuts, where do you go next? Because we're defining where the doors exist, which is actually our own very narrow sphere of understanding of what the future holds. And also, as a sector of people, we're a sector of people. We are not all industry. We are not the wisest, greatest. We have got what we've got. There's a point at which we need to actually say that's simply a door. There's another one over here. And actually quite a lot of the opportunities, some very wise young man told me, the main opportunities for his generation live between the cracks of the doors that are presented to them right now by us.
No, and I think you're absolutely spot on, Anna. I think that's the way we need to approach it. And we need to make sure, as I say, that's why I think adult education is so important, because it does signal to people there are second, third, fourth chances. I remember having a conversation with a young woman who had was leaving care, who said she simply wasn't ready to take GCSEs at 16 because of what was going on in her life. Now, I can't change that, because that is the way the education system works. However, what I did say to her is, have you been in touch with your local FE college? Have you looked at your adult education program locally? Because they will enable you to do GCSEs at another point in your life and to reskill. And we mustn't close that door down, because that is the little crack that enables you to walk between the doors, as you say, Anna. So very fundamentally important, I think.
Yeah, and a great
My
example.
apologies, Selina, I will need to leave in just a second. So.
Okay, no problems. I know you. I appreciate you going very soon. I think sadly we've lost Aisling as well. We'll see if we can get her back. But in the meantime, Anna, I just wondered if I could ask you, but following on from all that's been said, how you get buy-in for what may be considered these new ways of working and thinking. How do you actually bring that
results?
To reality.
Results.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about results.
Right.
And it's very easy, so I say all these things and people go, that's so lovely. I know, very well done. Results. So, for instance, we have got recruitment pipelines. We're going into a variety of different industries, different sectors, and we get results. So people are getting jobs. So they can see that and it makes sense. So people's bottom line is being reduced, their top line is being increased, and the results are there. We've recently founded a social enterprise cafe in Derby City Council, the Better Together Cafe, and that is entirely staffed by tutors and people with learning disabilities. And there we are. It's got results. So we know now that when we go to employers and we say, employers, please can you employ in a recruitment pipeline people with learning difficulties and learning disabilities, and we can show you how to do it. We're already doing it. Results. So we're now a catering company that goes out and externally caters, internally caters, and you can come and have lunch there, and it's lovely. The Ofsted went very well. There are tangible results. The budget was in deficit. Now it's not. Results. So there's almost no point in dealing with any of these things unless you've got the evidence where you've actually, put your money where your mouth is, and the thing you said would work actually worked. And it's about then celebrating that. So there isn't anybody inside Derby City Council, poor darlings, that doesn't know what we're doing. So, the senior leadership know what we're doing. I brief them regularly. The cabinet know what we're doing. I brief them regularly. And they get to understand how that the additionality of those results has a positive impact on them, because it saves them money, bottom line, top line, all of those things. And at the same time, we take on new projects and we get further results, and we're bringing arts into the Derby City Council, so the arts and the bringing the outside in. So it's all about the visuals, the optics, tangible financial results, and meeting other people's bottom line, so you understand their business model. It brings in a positive impact on their own business.
Great. I hear you loud and clear on that one. Sadly, we have also now lost Kate, but I know she said she had to go at midday, which has just happened. So, Kate, thank you very much for joining us, and we value your contribution as well. We do have one quick question, if you don't mind, Anna. I'm going to use this as the final question for this discussion. It's come in and it says, the current education system means that there is a limited time for our children to get education for free. I agree with Kate that there should be more chances. However, the cost is too high to fund them. Hence, how can we support people at a later stage in their lives to fund it? What are your thoughts on that, Anna? I appreciate, it's a big subject.
Well, it's a bit of the question from it, the infinity question, isn't it? And things change every day. I think different local authorities, we look at ways of funding things. So quite a lot of this, if you're on benefits, if you've got a very low household income, then quite a lot of this stuff is free anyway. So it's up to local authorities how they run their own system. And I think most of us have reduced prices, reduced the cost of adult education going forward. Now, there is an expectation that we should income generate, but we've made some fairly pragmatic choices about reducing our expectations there because we want to increase the reach. So I think it's about understanding the difference between what the law is and what flexibilities you've got with the funding you actually have in with you. And I think there's sometimes a disconnect between what you think you're allowed to do and what you can actually do.
Yeah. So keep an open mind is basically what you're saying, isn't it?
Just understand the rules where the law is, and don't imagine that you're not allowed to do things.
Okay, great. On that optimistic note, then, we will leave it there. Thank you, Anna, especially for staying all the way through to the end.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
No, it's been a pleasure talking to you, as it was to Kate and Aisling as well. And thank you, audience, for your questions. In fact, thank you to all our speakers so far. We've enjoyed hearing about the different topics. It's certainly been very insightful this morning. We're going to take a lunch break now, though, and our next panel discussion is mentoring for modernisation. That will be after the break. Now, during the break, don't forget, if you jump into the meeting hub, you are building connections with delegates, not only for the event, but also with those who sign up for future events too. So enjoy lunch, and we will see you back here at 2 o'clock. Thank you.